Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld with Kimberly Guilfoyle, Richard Fowler, Jesse Waters, and Dana Perino, The Five. President Trump and First Lady Melania met with doctors, first responders, and survivors of Sunday's massacre. Roll the tape.
The patience, the bravery. Some were very, very badly wounded, and they were badly wounded because they refused to leave. They wanted to help others because they saw people going down all over. And it's an incredible thing to see. This tremendous bravery. The police department, incredible. The people themselves, incredible. People leaving ambulances to have somebody else go because they thought they were hurt, even more so.
Meanwhile, here's new body cam footage taken from police officers from that night.
Go that way, go that way, go that way. Hey, they're shooting right at us, guys. Everybody stay down. Stay down. Where's it at?
North of the Mandalay Bay is coming out of a window.
Hey, get down! Go that way! Get out of here! There's gunshots coming from over there! Go that way! Go that way!
Remember when body cams were used to capture police infractions? But here they reveal men running into a hail of bullets, pure heroism that vastly dwarfs the abuses that the media magnifies and players kneel over. So, from heroes to zeros. See this cartoon from a Vermont paper. It's a pile of bodies with the caption, "What happens in Vegas," etc. By Randall Enos. It reveals how detached leftists are from humanity. The paper, the Bennington Banner, apologized. They claimed they were just trying to spur debate. Well, there's no debate. Your paper sucks. Speaking of pathetic attention seekers, a Drexel University professor blames Trumpism for Vegas, tweeting, "White people and men are told that they are entitled to everything. This is what happens when they don't get what they want." That's a Drexel professor, the same ghoul who once called for white genocide. You know, it seems like there are more racist creeps in academia than the general population. I ask parents, why send your kids to Drexel? I think that might be child abuse. Back to the heroes. How about that Marine vet who stole a truck to help transport victims from the killing field to the hospital?
Lucked out on the first truck, opened the door, and the keys were there, and looked at Jen and said, "Let's go get some people." Each trip was 10 to 15 people, as many as we could cram in there. We were just trying to go down the line of the dozens and dozens of people that were already being pulled out to the street. It was really hard to just pack up and leave because, you know, you can only fit so many people, and there's so many people that still needed help, and no ambulances were on scene yet.
So there's a comparison, a military hero and a Professor Zero. One inspires, the other repulses. I'm thinking the military offers the far better education than academia, at least in moments that matter in life. I ask myself, would I have learned more in a barracks instead of going to Berkeley?
Yes.
The answer is yes. You read my mind, Kimberly. I often think because of my education, I think of myself as a last responder. I'm the one that's running. Dana, what did you think of the president's remarks today?
Well, you never want to necessarily get better at disaster recovery because that means that you're actually having to go to a lot of disasters. But this is a presidency that's only 9 months into its 4 years, possibly 8. And I don't know if it's growing into it, but the remarks are always spot on. So there's two things I've noticed. One is that when he is one-on-one with people and it's not scripted, he's really good. He always has been. And in some ways, at his rallies, remember when he's not on a teleprompter, it's almost as if he's talking to each person individually and he likes the crowd. But what he did in Puerto Rico yesterday was to let the people know, like, I came, so I took the time to come. I promised you that we're going to be here to help. And I touched a few people individually. So that means a lot. Then you go to, if you look at Monday when he did the speech from the diplomatic reception room immediately after the tragedy, that was beautiful presidential oratory. And then today you have him at the University Medical Center, and he's always with the First Lady, Melania Trump, by his side. And I could think about what it means to the people that are in the hospital recovering from these horrible wounds that the president took the time to come. He spent an hour longer than he was meant to when he was there. And then he's talking to the medical responders. And what this does for him as well is that it gets him out of the Oval Office. It's one of the things I kept thinking in those first 8 months before there was a changeover in leadership at the White House is why do they not get him out of Washington? Washington is not where he should be. He is not a creature of Washington. Of course, he has to sort of manage the White House. But once they've been getting him out into the country, he was giving speeches in Indiana and Missouri on tax reform, traveling around to do other things, see people, he does a lot better. And I think he represents all of us well because we can't go there to the hospital, but we can all feel pretty inspired by what he said today.
Let me throw to another piece of tape from President Trump, and then I'll ask Kimberly your thoughts.
The example of those whose final act was to sacrifice themselves for those they loved should inspire all of us to show more love every day for the people who grace our lives. In the months ahead, we will all have to wrestle with the horror of what has unfolded this week, but we will struggle through it together. We will endure the pain together, and we will overcome together as Americans.
Thoughts, Kimberly?
I really think it was a powerful moment for the president, and you can feel that he's speaking from his heart, that it's genuine. And I think when you go there, there's really no substitute to actually going to the scene, going to the place, whether it's a natural disaster or a horrific mass shooting like happened in Las Vegas. You know, you really feel it, and I think it's important for the country to see that. I'm glad that he went there, and for anyone to question why he went there, they would criticize him if he didn't. And absolutely, the president belongs there. This was so tragic, and the fact that it was the largest mass shooting in American history in and of itself is so significant, and it deserves the presence and the contemplation and reflection of the president.
Jesse, these events always reveal two sides. There's usually more heroes than zeros.
Yeah.
But the zeros are kind of more interesting because they're just so bad. But,
yeah. I mean, when tragedy strikes, people can decide if they want to be heroes or villains. The heroes run towards the bullets. They donate blood. They donate money. They console a victim. They explain to children what exactly happened. But the villains seek to divide instead of unite. They exploit this for personal gain, for financial gain. They write silly cartoons, and it's a mess. Now, social media and TV has a way of holding a mirror up to this country, and that's good because it shows who the real haters are. When you have a professor like this that blames all white men for the shooting, when there's a terrorist attack, does he blame all Muslims? Of course not. Or Hillary Clinton, who demonized the Second Amendment right on the heels of this, struck the wrong note. The CBS executive said she has no sympathy for any of these victims. Even CNN said the only reason he rushed to Vegas was because he had a hotel there. It's really disgusting. And then the press can't bemoan the polarization of the country and then turn around at the same time and contribute to that same polarization. If you're going to blame Trump for Charlottesville or mock Melania's heels for Harvey or lie about the Puerto Rico recovery or even say that every member of Congress is complicit in the shooting death of 59 people. You can't do that. So the media spent, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 years denigrating law enforcement. Some of those stories were fake news. But other of those stories, there were some bad apples there, and I have to admit that. But at the same time, now is an opportunity for the media to tell those heroic stories and sing the praises of law enforcement, and not just the police, but the EMTs, the SWAT teams, because they saved a lot of lives out there. And the media has so many resources they can bring to bear towards a tragedy, especially the networks. And you see there's an appetite out there, especially after what we saw in Texas, to hear stories of personal bravery. And instead of spotlighting those great stories that are the real America, they're focused on the bitterness and the divisiveness of the country, and that's what you see, but that's not the real America.
Richard, if I remember, was your mother a nurse?
She is.
Yes, so I'm sure when you look at this stuff, when you look at the first responders in the hospital and what's happening right now, it must mean something to you.
Oh, no, it absolutely does, and I always like to take these moments to shout out those individuals, right? So I mean, I think we saw the president today with the police and with the EMTs, but some of these healthcare professionals are still working, and they're still dealing with the 400 and 500 victims that are still in the hospital today. So a big shout out to all the healthcare professionals that are still working at University Medical Center, Sunrise Hospital Medical Center, St. Rosa Dominicana Hospital. They have 3 campuses, all in Las Vegas, who are dealing with many, many, many victims. Some of these nurses are working 3, 4, 5 shifts to deal with the just volume of patients. So a big shout out to them. They are true American heroes in my book.
They probably aren't sleeping.
No, not at all.
I heard an amazing story about I think it was at the University Medical Center. A friend of mine has a friend who just got his residency last week and started there, and his first on-duty Monday, this is what happened. Or Sunday night, he works the weekends.
Wow, what a way to break in.
And I think nobody really knows the toll that it takes on these individuals. So my mom she was also part of the Irma team in Miami, and she literally slept on the hospital floor for 3 days. Wow. When the hospital ran out of power, they were still there taking care of patients. So they really do yeoman's work. They're also doing the same type of work in Puerto Rico. So big shout out to all the healthcare professionals.
Yeah. You know, when I go back to the Bennington Banner, it's a small paper out of southern Vermont. They've apologized. What I find interesting about their apology is that they regret it. They said they were trying to spur debate because they felt that, you know, nothing ever gets done after this. So, like, I could see if somebody said, oh, we were just making a sick joke. Like, okay. But when you justify a sick joke by saying, well, we're politically superior.
Right.
We're coming from a politically superior point of view. Therefore, we felt this was appropriate. We realized we're wrong because of the outcry. I find that a little
So, can I ask you, if you were in publishing, what would you have apologized?
Yes.
Not that you would have been.
No, that never would have run.
It never would have run.
Never would have run.
So you told the cartoonist to get out.
I have a sick sense of humor, you know. But I even like I look at that and I go, well, it's a terrible cartoon. I would have fired if I owned that paper. I would have fired the editor.
It's a terrible paper. We had some run-ins with the Bennington Banner when I worked on the O'Reilly Factor.
Oh, I'm sure.
They are tremendously dishonest. They would side against rape victims, child rape victims. When we did a lot of the Jessica's Law coverage up there, they were giving really soft sentence to child rapists. And we went up and confronted some of the editors up there, and they were total cowards, would not justify any of the editorials up there. It's a very fringe, far-left paper. They're extremely irresponsible. So it doesn't surprise me at all. Victims, child rape victims, when we did a lot of the Jessica's Law coverage up there, they were giving really soft sentence to child rapists. And we went up and confronted some of the editors up there, and they were total cowards, would not justify any of the editorials up there. It's a very fringe, far-left paper. They're extremely irresponsible. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they would run such an offensive cartoon. And I don't even buy the justification. I don't buy that at all. They thought it was cute and edgy, and they ran it, then got called out, so they apologized.
The Drexel thing, too, is interesting because this guy, I didn't mention his name on purpose, but he has a history of doing these kind of inflammatory things. I'm assuming he has tenure.
Well, yeah, but interesting because the CBS lawyer got fired.
Right.
Academia, he probably got a
he got a promotion.
Bonus.
He got a promotion.
Spot bonus.
To some extent, though, but to some extent, I mean, that's the ideal of academia. You come to academia, you get tenure, and your job is to sort of do research and to say things.
Go on Twitter.
What research was he doing?
No,
right
but
there?
the reason why I say that is because, you know, what some people, 30 years ago, when people were like, you know, the gay people should get married, everybody was like, this is blasphemy. This is the worst thing in the world. These people should be shunned. And now, look at it. We're in 2017.
That wasn't
and
civil
gay people
rights
are married.
commentary.
No, but the point I'm
That was
making
just an
is the
offensive
reason why there's university tenure
I get
is
it.
to protect these academics who say things
But sometimes
that
I
some
think
would find offensive.
but I
or
think
to the
Everybody
contrary.
finds that offensive.
Yeah.
And also, I think that, you know, times change. I don't think his bosses at the college are going like, no, that's for Twitter. It's like, no, I think he's basically thinks he can do this, and he's
Yeah, but they use it as an excuse to get away with it. They have poor judgment, and they're morally depraved and disgusting. So there's no excuse for him.
There you go.
I have to pay him a visit.
When Kimberly says there's no excuse for you, oh, you got to feel
Done.
pretty bad.
That's it.
Done.
Done.
Coming up, the girlfriend of shooter Stephen Paddock has returned to the States. What does she know? The latest next.
Girlfriend of the Las Vegas gunman returned to the U.S. overnight from the Philippines. She could provide crucial clues as to why Stephen Paddock opened fire on a crowd of thousands Sunday night. Mary Lou Danley's sisters claim she had no knowledge of her boyfriend's deadly plot.
I know that she don't know anything as well like us. She was sent away She was sent away so that she will be not there to interfere or put this planning.
Trace Gallagher with the latest, now live from Vegas. What's up, Trace?
Well, Jesse, Mary Lou Danley, we can tell you, has been in the FBI offices in Los Angeles now for the better part of 5 hours. We cannot confirm that she's been interviewed by FBI agents for that long, but she certainly is still inside the building. We should also note this is a voluntary interview for her. She has been listed as a person of interest, and she does have her lawyer on hand in the interviews, but this is a voluntary thing. The FBI saying she's welcome to come and go as she pleases. The experts are telling us what the FBI is focusing on here is Stephen Paddock's mental state. What was he like in the weeks leading up to this shooting and before she left for the Philippines? His political affiliations, his religious beliefs, anything that can point them in the direction of the unknown motive. And maybe they want to find out more about what groups he has spoken with, individuals he might have spoken with in the weeks and months leading up to this crime. They also would be very interested to find out about her knowledge of this vast arsenal of weapons found inside the home in Mesquite, the home in Reno, which are both homes that she lived in with Stephen Paddock, and what knowledge she had about the explosives and the ammunition and all of that stuff. Her sisters, as you said, think the reason she was sent away to the Philippines is because that she would have tried to stop him from conducting this shooting. The FBI may probe into that as well. We should tell you the FBI interview could go anywhere from 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. It's unclear if she's going to come back to Las Vegas. She could be in Los Angeles for a few days. We want to show you these pictures from the Daily Mail. These are new pictures of the guns that Stephen Paddock had inside the Mandalay Bay hotel room. These are some of the semi-automatic weapons there. This is an idea of some of the 23 weapons he had in there. We now know from the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms that at least 12 of those weapons were equipped with the bump stock. That's the mechanism that automatically turns the trigger close to an automatic weapon. It just keeps it perpetually engaged, firing between 400 and 800 bullets per minute. They will check out that as well. And we should note, Jesse, that we will be outside the FBI offices, so when Mary Lou Danley walks out, we will be there to greet her if she's talking to the media.
Excellent.
Jesse.
Thank you very much, Trace. So, Kimberly, 6 hours being interviewed by the FBI. I can't imagine what that's like. What kind of questions would you be asking this girlfriend?
Yeah, well, I think what's going to be very important is to see whether she's making consistent statements with perhaps text messages that she has seen relatives, and try to see if she's actually being truthful with respect to her relationship with him in terms of what she knew when she was present, and if there was any kind of way that she had information or helped him or assisted him. Was anything put in her name or purchased under her name, using her credit card, anything like that, because there was some information that a credit card perhaps was left, in the room that identified back to her. They did say that she came here on her own, but as you see, there's statements now from her relatives that we've been hearing some of the sound on tape of that in terms of, what did she tell them about the relationship? Did she discuss about the weapons or the ammunition? It seems that the family is trying to lay the narrative that he must have sent her away because he knew that he was going to do this and therefore didn't want her to be dragged into it. But there's also the whole financial aspect and tentacles of it to say, okay, at what point was he sending the money? How much over what period of time? Did he send more money to, a number of different accounts to other relatives? Where did she say the money got from? Where did she say that he was employed or that he told her? I mean, there's a lot of questions they're going to have her, and they're probably going to bring her back in for further, questioning. The thing that was smart that she did was cooperate with the authorities and try and hurry up, and get back here.
But you're right.
And any friends and associates like that he hung around with, anybody that he was talking to, communicating to, especially if there's been some, evidence scrubbed from his, forensic, files in terms of different devices. And they said there's quite a few devices, but he seemed pretty savvy as it relates to those things. So he probably did his best to kind of wipe them.
Those are all great points, Kimberly. What does your gut tell you about the girlfriend, Richard?
I don't know. I don't have because I haven't heard her voice, so I don't really have a determination of how. I'm not Kimberly Guilfoyle, so no prosecutor. But I think I want to hear her voice and hear her side of the story. Right now, my gut tells me that she's just like, listen, I get he could be crazy. He sent me away, and then he engaged in he was a psycho. I didn't know that. I mean, I think it's possible. There are a lot of times you see cases where they were like, he had a secret life I knew nothing about. And I'm just as surprised as you are. And I guess we'll have to see what the FBI finds out.
Yeah, it's definitely plausible. We're hearing reports he purchased about 33 guns within just the last year, Dana.
Right.
That's a lot of weapons.
I was wondering, like, when they said there's 12 in the room with the bump stocks, and so I'd be curious if they can do any sort of financial trace back. I assume that you deal in cash when you are buying these types of weapons, but I don't know. And also with her, I kind of like don't buy it necessarily.
Really?
Like she had no idea, because the FBI has said that they think he was planning this for 2 months. He had all of those weapons all across in these 2 homes, and then she leaves. And I'm not saying that she's legally culpable by any means, but that doesn't seem plausible to me.
Not oblivious.
She knows more than she's saying.
All right.
Or maybe she's telling them.
Exactly. But they're going to find out, as you said.
They're going to find out regardless.
Greg Gutfeld, final thoughts?
I don't think it's the lady that's going to give you the information. It's going to be the laptop. We got to figure out what he was doing, what he was searching for. You know, what if this guy just wanted to beat a record? And how bizarre that would be if there was no agenda, if there was no mission, if he wasn't radicalized, if he didn't hate Trump supporters, everybody, including myself. I want a reason so badly. Yeah. But what if he was just trying to beat a record? The other thing I've been thinking about.
Wouldn't that be crazy?
I've been thinking about the tower shooter in Texas, Charles Whitman, who just was a normal guy, climbed a water tower, killed a bunch of people. Then they opened up his skull, and they found a massive brain tumor, resting on an area that affected his behavior. And it's like, what happens if it's something like that? And what happens if we never know? That's the freakiest thing. If this goes away without any kind of closure, it's going to drive us nuts.
There's a couple of initial reports about mental health.
And I think the other thing I would add is don't be surprised. I just have this feeling, this eerie feeling that a letter is going to show up in the mail to a police department or to a manifesto to a random news station. He doesn't seem to be the social media type of guy. Right. But he could have sent a letter. Yes. And randomly, Oklahoma news station gets a letter from him.
A postcard
telling you his manifesto of why he did it.
Well, hopefully we find that one of these days. The left has stepped up its push for more gun control in America, but some Democratic lawmakers are remaining silent on the subject. There's a reason. Next.
The right has been criticized often by the left for attempting to block the gun control debate. Watch.
They say it's inappropriate to be talking about it because it's too soon. Well, maybe it's too soon for you because deep down inside, in your heart, you bear some responsibility.
The president, many Republicans want to put off a discussion on gun laws, obviously, put off permanently. They argue now's not the time, though there never will be a time. Those poor dears, they can't handle the conversation.
When 59 people lie dead, what happens is they roll out, and by they, it's not political will. This is a very deliberate, well-rehearsed series of things that the Republicans who are doing the work of the NRA roll out.
But the argument may not be as black and white as they think. The National Journal reports some red state Democrats up for re-election have not come out for more gun control in the wake of the Las Vegas shootings, and they probably won't. There's a little bit, it's not as clear-cut. And when you're talking about gun control, Greg, one thing that you always talk about is looking at facts versus emotion. So today in the Washington Post, there was a writer, did an op-ed. She used to work for 538, and she said she was for gun control, but that as she analyzed every statistic, nothing led her to evidence that would support the gun control changes.
It's what happens, and it's when I plead with people who have emotional arguments like Kimmel. It's a purely emotional and incorrect argument, and he impugns people who disagree with him. He's impugning people that actually read these articles, that know the facts. I spend hours on this stuff, and I love debating on guns. But if you use facts instead of feelings, you find that you may have to make the switch because your feelings are going to evaporate and you're not going to have anything left. Emotional arguments wither. They're attractive, but data always beats emotions. I wish it was different. I wish there was data that said, this is what caused this, so we can do it. If it's the bump stocks, ban them. I'm for that. That's the only thing I can put my handle on that might be different. But look, the Washington Post article is very powerful because I was a reporter who changed her mind because she was going like everything was a dead end. She could see. The irony, too, is that some people are so distrustful of Trump that they only want the government to have guns? How does that make any sense, Kimmel?
That is interesting. I'm going to have you listen, Kimberly, to Peggy Noonan, who always seems to have her finger on the pulse of America. Here we go.
There is a sense that society is collapsing. The culture is collapsing. We're collapsing in crime. The world is collapsing. Crazy people with bad haircuts have nukes. Everything's going bad, terrorism, etc. They want to be fully armed on their hills at home.
Well, it's the same element.
And you can say the same thing you do, but you'll lose.
For the apocalypse.
But they're Americans, and they want to go down fighting.
Always interesting to hear her perspective, Kimberly.
Yeah, and I think she just has a very good sense of things and, you know, kind of tapping into the pulse of where the country is going, what the current mood and emotion is, and kind of seeing the trajectory, the path that it might take. And I think she, you know, she's right about this. There's so much that when you wake up in the morning that, quite honestly, that's, you know, frightening. That people feel like things are not within their control, and then they think that a sense of self-preservation, not because they, you know, love President Trump or they're crazy right wing, because there are people with families that they want to protect, that they want to feel safe in their homes, and they feel like the world is an unsafe place right now. And there's evidence, you know, to support that with some things that we're covering in the news.
How different is that from what President Obama said? Clinging to your guns and religion.
Yeah, I know.
That's one of the
And we all yelled at Obama for that.
Well, President Obama was the NRA's greatest salesman. I think gun sales almost, skyrocketed under his administration.
Yeah,
a lot of that
sales
was
do
because,
go up after events like this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of domestic terrorism the last 8 years. There's a lot of economic instability, and then the president always threatening to come after guns. That's a problem, too. But going back to what you brought up, these wedge issues like guns, the Democrats lost that wedge issue. They won on gay marriage, but they lost on guns. They can cry about it all they want to raise money, but they don't have the votes. A lot of these senators, you know, in North Dakota or Missouri, Montana, Democratic senators, they're not going to vote to crack down on the Second Amendment. Remember Hillary Clinton during the debates went after Bernie Sanders, socialist, for being too pro-gun. But he understands that because he's from a rural state in Vermont. Now, the polling also doesn't help the Democrats on the issue. 48% of American households own guns. 50% of Americans say the government's doing too much to take away their Second Amendment rights. And I think the NRA has a better favorability rating than Congress right now. I agree with Greg. Bump stocks might have to be looked at. I'm also opening to looking at background checks and mentally ill people having access to guns, too. But the issue with guns is similar to the issue with abortion with Democrats. Any small infringement on abortion, they go crazy. Any small infringement on the Second Amendment, conservatives go crazy. So there's no bipartisanship there.
We didn't leave enough time for Richard, but I do want to ask you, would the Democrats be willing to look at something narrow, like if it is bump stocks, is that something that...
I think they will. I'm proud of Jesse because he seems to be moving to background checks. I think that's a very noble thing of you.
Thank you, Richard.
But this guy would have passed him. He would have passed him. And
I mean, I think the larger... My argument is this, and I said this earlier on air today, it's just this: we need to have a larger conversation about it. My problem with this psycho in this particular instance, and in the Alexandria shooting with the congressman, is my problem is when you are out, and I'm not the biggest supporter of law enforcement, I don't have a law enforcement flag in my front yard, but when these individuals over and over again are outgunning law enforcement, we should be concerned as Americans. In Alexandria, they had more bullets than law enforcement. Here, he had more bullets and more surveillance than law enforcement. One of the security officers were shot. So sometimes Americans have to say to ourselves, okay, so you're outlawing the people that are supposed to protect us. That's problematic. When you have 47 weapons between your three houses, you have high-capacity magazines, you have rifles that have the ability to penetrate police armor. These are all things that are problematic. I'm not saying we need to pass sweeping gun regulations to take everybody's guns. My father and brother are both gun owners. But what can we do to make sure you don't have 47 weapons?
You made the point, too. It's hard to say the state is out of control and police people
are starting to
harass black men unfairly, and then saying, but we need to make sure every citizen doesn't have any arms.
When you are outgunned, when the SWAT team is outgunned by one loon, we have a problem.
I'm totally outgunned by you two taking up time. I'm getting yelled at, so we're going to have to go to keep it in the break. Coming up, why Secretary Tillerson was forced to reiterate his commitment to President Trump. We'll explain next.